that we should note is that they only are relying on self-report. That means the kids are giving us the information. We're not getting information from teachers or from parents. But the kids are telling us that the longer they play and the more they play aggressive games, they start thinking in an aggressive way and they have more aggressive attitudes. That's not necessarily a link to violence.
All right, so the big question is, do video games cause violence, and what your thoughts are?
I don't think they do, because during the game sometimes, so sometimes if I'm playing a game, I might get kind of irritated or something, but I don't show violent behavior, and afterwards I'm not violent either. So
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't.
Okay. So basically the big question is, do video games cause violence, and what your thoughts are? So.
I'd say to some extent they might cause violence, but they shouldn't be completely to blame. If you have a little toddler constantly playing a war game or something, they might start play fighting or whatever, and I don't think that lead to violence per se, but to some extent, I guess.
Alright.
But if you have someone just kind of, they play it when they want to, and it won't really affect them, I don't think.
Okay. Any other thoughts? So basically the big question is, do video games cause violence, and what your thoughts are?
I honestly don't think they do. What I really think it is the personality of the person, and it just affects them differently than other people. And it's really not the game's cause, it's really just the person's personality, really.
Yeah. Alright. So basically, what do you even think that video games cause violence?
No, mainly because I've seen evidence of a lot of people that play violent video games who are not violent themselves.
Yeah. So pretty much the question is, do video games cause violence, and pretty much what are your thoughts?
I don't think video games alone cause violence. I think it requires something else on top of that.
Yeah.
I think if you're already predisposed to it, and you're already having a lot of struggles, video games could be that tipping point, depending on certain ideals that are shown in there, certain concepts, and just it might drive someone over the edge. But I think if you got a normal, non-violent person that's playing a violent video game, they won't get any more violent from that.
Alright, so big question is, do video games cause violence, and what are your thoughts?
I feel like video games allow people to release their anger through playing the video game, such as Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. They allow them to do the things that they wouldn't usually be able to do in real life, and just allow them to get different experiences through the video games.
So basically the big question is do video games cause violence, and what your thoughts are?
Okay, I think there are aspects of it that can aggravate a person in some ways, sometimes even physically, but I don't, personally I don't believe that it can make them more aggressive or more dangerous to other people or anything like that. I think it's just, it depends on the person a lot of times,
Yeah.
Obviously, but I do think that there are parts of it that make people upset if they lose or something like that, but it's not something that can really change a person so much that it affects their personality.
Alright, so the big question is if video games cause violence, and what your thoughts are.
I think for most people it doesn't desensitize them, but I think for certain types of people, I think constantly murdering people virtually makes it easier to do it in reality. So overall, probably not, but I think some people probably do get influenced by it.
Alright, any other thoughts?
Well, there's one thing I saw once. There's this, in the military, they find that in World War II, soldiers were more reluctant to fire their weapons, and that most people on D-Day actually didn't shoot at other people. But during the invasion of Iraq, they found 90% of people were shooting their weapons. And so one of the ideas was is because video games kind of prepped them for it. And so I do wonder, like, it just becomes easier to pull the trigger if you've pulled it virtually millions of times.
Do not mix and are not, it's not accurate pretty much. So in an article by, what is it, NPR station, called What Research Says About Video Games and Violence in Children, it states that President Donald Trump says, "I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts." That only explains what he thinks and what he's hearing, not the actual crucial evidence. And then in another article from procon.com, titled Do Video Games Contribute to Youth Violence? The very first con, where is it? Is sales of violent video games have significantly increased, while violent juvenile crime rates have significantly decreased. Excuse me. And then con 2, studies claiming a causal link between video game violence and real life violence are flawed. That is actually kind of crucial to my explanation, because it's just explaining that it's flawed pretty much, and it says many studies fail to control for factors that contribute to children becoming violent, such as family history and mental health. Plus, most studies do not follow children over long periods of time. That also explains that pretty much it's just flawed and it can't be supported at all about video games and violence like contributing to our youth and just adults as well. Like, pretty much, if you were to, like, here's an example pretty much. If you were to, like, go play a violent video game, would you or would you not go into school acting violent right after? Or would you stay in your house acting violent right after you play the game? No, at least not all the time, because basically it's in your brain that it's basically violence around us will cause us to be violent. There's no crucial evidence to support it at all. Well, see you next time. Thanks.
Now, first off, let's all agree that aggression is a very common byproduct of playing video games. It doesn't happen all the time.
Studies typically had someone play a violent video game, and right after the game is done, researchers would test aggression and empathy levels.
More and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts.
Yeah, it's kind of been hard actually to show a direct causal link between video games and any kind of positive or negative behavior.
Still no evidence that they cause violence.
People